Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I have a special guest with us today. I have Kevin Klossman. He has an amazing new podcast that's up right now, and it's called Dungeons of Delirium. Kevin, thank you for coming on, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Good, man. Good. It's a pleasure having you on. So tell us a little bit about Dungeons of Delirium.
Yeah, so Dungeon of Delirium is a podcast that I do in conjunction with my business partner, Chelsea. We write our own short stories, and then we dramatically read them with voice actors and with a synth score and sound effects, and try to create kind of an immersive audio experience. So each episode is one new original story. And then we have kind of some more longer and multi-episode arcs that we're working on at the moment. But for our first season, which will be premiering October 6th, it will all be self-contained episodes that we've written.
Sweet. And you and your partner write each and every one of these stories?
Yep. Yeah. So we actually met back in early 2020. I was directing a short film, and she was working as the production designer on it. And unfortunately, our shoot dates were the last weekend of March, so it got kind of cut. And we built some elaborate sets and done a lot of kind of interesting prop work and costume work. And unfortunately, the location we were using, we only had a limited amount of time, and we ended up having to tear those down before we could shoot anything with it. And throughout the pandemic, I kind of started to think about the idea of doing something with audio, because it's a lot, it's something you can always do, even if it's, the middle of a pandemic and so that's sort of where Dungeon of Delirium came from. And there was, a variety of other projects that I worked on in the interim. And so we really just released our first couple of episodes in June and July of this year. And right now we're in the midst of producing the next 7. So I've been reading my stories for the last several days, recording those. We're starting on Chelsea's this week as well. So we're really excited to get those ready. And that's probably going to be my life for the next couple of weeks.
That's amazing. So to push out that many stories that quick, where do you get your inspiration from?
So I have a few different ways that I kind of come up with stories. I would say, as someone who's like writing a lot and always kind of I'm always thinking about different ideas. So when I watch movies or read books or watch TV, I'll get kind of like little moments might inspire me in a show, or I might think, oh, it would be interesting if someone took that and went this direction with it. But another method I often use too is just think about like very mundane situations in life that maybe cause anxiety or frustration or dread, like going to the DMV or, staying at a party, till 2:00 in the morning, and then things get weird, like just situations really pretty normal. Everybody's experienced them. Mm-hmm. And then saying, okay, what's the worst that could happen in real life? Then what's the worst that could happen in, when reality is not a stumbling block to the creative process. So, you go to the party, and then by the end of the night, someone's telling you about some vision of hell that they had. So that was an episode at least. And so that's kind of where I come from. And that method works well for me because it's sort of easy to put yourself in the shoes of that person. And it tends to feel pretty authentic to me when I write based on even just a little bit of an experience that I've had.
Okay. Have you ever wrote anything and you looked at it, you're like, wait a minute, this is too dark to put out there? Or
I've certainly written things that I decided not to release for varieties of reasons. Either I didn't like it enough, or it's just like, this is dark in a way that doesn't necessarily serve anything other than just to be dark. I definitely play around a lot with pretty dark and nihilistic as themes in a lot of the stories that I write, but always to serve some part of the plot or to serve the story that we're writing. When it's just like, let's see how dark and dreary we can be, I try to kind of step back from that. So I definitely have written things where I'm like, I don't know if this is the move right now, but I would say generally, I would probably say that maybe like 1 out of every 3 stories I write is likely to get past the point of just existing as a file in my Google Drive.
Now, being a filmmaker
Mm-hmm.
and also being a writer, what are some struggles for being a writer that you don't necessarily have to worry about for a filmmaker and vice versa?
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting, and it plays well into the transition from doing film to doing a lot of audio fiction. One of the things I've actually really enjoyed about doing the audio stories is I don't have to filter everything through the frame of like, can I afford to put this on camera? Like, am I writing a scene that is just too elaborate for me to be able to pull off in a way that's convincing? Whereas aside from writing a bunch of additional voice actors into a story or, trying to write in licensed music, there's really nothing that I can't do in an audio story. So if I want to set something during World War I can do that, and it doesn't cost me any more money than setting something in 2023. Whereas when you're making a film, you any period piece, even if it's 2010, if you want to do it well, it's expensive to get authentic props, to get everything to be within continuity and to make sense and reconcile with the setting. Whereas when I'm writing, I just need to make sure whatever I'm writing about is true to that period. So that's pretty freeing. I would say generally as a writer, what you have to worry about as a writer versus a filmmaker. One thing that I'm finding that I have to spend more time on is conveying things that you could normally show on a camera. It doesn't, like, you want to give a sense of what's happening in a story, but really honing in on, okay, I can't describe every single square inch of this scene. What are the things that I really want the audience to key in on? And so it's really not, I would say, terribly different than making a film, where you're still kind of trying to, arrange your set so that it highlights the things that are important. But you have to be very cognizant of it in a way, I think, when you're writing something that's just audio.
I agree. And I mean, for someone who does audio, listens to audio and writing, like the writers who are really good at it, they almost, it's like you see and smell and feel everything that they're describing, and that's definitely takes a special kind of talent.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I'm always working to get better at, because I think when something audio or just written, it often can even feel more real than watching something on screen, because you're really engaging your mind.
Your imagination is going wild at that point.
Yeah. So I definitely had a lot of fun with that. And I guess one other thing that I've kind of noticed in the process of doing this that is sort of similar to making a film is, or at least it's parallel to it, is, a lot of the stuff you can still do a lot of that storytelling just with the score and the atmospheric and ambient sound effects, especially when it's mixed well. And so I've definitely tried to play around a little bit with giving a sense of physicality and place to the sounds and the sound effects in the episodes. And so it's definitely building an airplane in the sky kind of thing, where we're just learning as we go. But fortunately, I have some friends that do work professionally in audio that have given me a lot of tips and help in the process of recording the first few episodes.
That's pretty amazing. Now, each story is going to be, an episode is going to be actually different story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at any point would there, I'm not going to say a sequel, but would there be a spinoff of another story?
Yeah, so definitely that is a plan that I have. Specifically doing something that either is maybe a three-part story that spans multiple episodes, or building on a previous episode, or even just doing a podcast spinoff that is a serial narrative where we'd have 4, 6, 8 episodes a season that are all about the same characters. So that's definitely in the works. It becomes, at least for me, and I think for a lot of writers, it becomes exponentially harder the more parts you add to a story, because a short horror story, you can get away with a really narrow sort of character arc where somebody has a singular experience and you see one thing change about them. As you start writing multiple episodes, you have to do a lot more work to like really flesh the characters out, which is something I'm really excited to get the chance to do. But I'm trying to crawl, walk, run with this one. So I would say that might be something we'll dip our toes into in 2024 with some maybe 3 or 4 part stories. And then, as we get a little more comfortable with that medium, moving on to something that's maybe even a little more ambitious than that.
That's awesome. Now I'm gonna ask you a question that probably no one's ever asked you before.
All right.
I'm a brand new YouTuber, and just getting my name out there, getting marketing, it's a lot. It's tough to stand out, and especially at a marketplace that's so saturated with people who are pretty much doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that something as a new podcaster that you have ran into, and what are some of the things that you are doing to try to stand out?
Yeah, so definitely it is. I think for every podcast that just like is an overnight success, I think there's probably 10,000 of them that either never get off the ground or grow slowly, which is really what we expected and what we're seeing, and we're pretty happy with the response we've gotten so far. But it is definitely a grind, as I'm sure you experience as well, where you almost have to, in some cases, just convert one person at a time. And
it's a full-time job. It's a full-time job.
The advantages that I feel like we have is, so we have another business called Little Ghost Boutique, which is like a horror head shop where we do custom horror themed bongs and whatnot that we all make. And so we've been doing some in-person events. We have one in October, and then probably another couple in January. And so we get to talk to a lot of people, and you can see they're kind of blurred out, but we have our little ghost banner over here, and this is a Dungeon of Delirium. When we go to a show, we have these, and we have a table where we have products, but we also have some kind of music score that I maybe have left over from the podcast or that I've stripped from the podcast playing. And we have info about the podcast, and just kind of little giveaways, stickers, things like that, and try to just sort of talk to people about it. And that's, I would say, anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody in person, like face to face, it's so much easier to get someone excited about what you do than like, sometimes social media can just feel like hollering into a void, or just a bunch, everybody that you're following, everybody you're talking to are other people trying to do the same thing. And it's definitely, for us, I think, it's been a slow and steady increase. But it's still like, it does sometimes feel like every listener is a hard fought battle. But my hope and expectation is that there's a tipping point where you get enough people listening to the show organically and referring them other people to it, that it starts to feed itself. And I think it's just a matter of getting enough people on the top of the funnel to get there. But yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of parallels with YouTube as well. Just having to kind of fight for every subscriber, every viewer, and but it does seem like you're real active with it. I've watched a bunch of every day.
Yeah, thank you. But I mean, one of the things you said, so like, I can tell any YouTuber podcaster that especially is going to horror genre, conventions. Horror conventions are where you're going to get 80 to 90% of your subscribers. I can go to any horror convention right now and get 10 to 20 subscribers like that. Compared to if I do it the what's the term? The natural way or the
organic or
the organic way. Yes. If I do the organic way, it might take me a whole month to get 20 subscribers.
Yeah.
So I try to go as many horror conventions as possible. Because I mean that's face to face is still the way to. I don't care what anybody says. Social media is great, but it's not. Face to face communication. Get out there, get in front of your fans' faces. That's the best way to market yourself. Any business.
Yeah. No, and it's also a great way to get a sense of who your listeners are or your viewers are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, we've only done one event so far since we've launched the podcast, but we have another one in October, and they're all like,
which one?
That we're going to in January, and we're going to be doing hopefully a live podcast performance that same weekend.
Sweet.
On the details of that right now, so have some more news on that front soon, but. Yeah, I used to work at a comic store when I was in high school, so I did the convention circuit all the time, and so I got pretty comfortable in that environment. And so now going to the horror conventions, they're basically the same thing. And you meet a lot of cool people that way, and it's also a great way to meet other people that you can kind of collaborate with or cross promote with, or just that maybe have something that you find interesting and that you want to engage with. So I'm a huge fan, and generally they pay for themselves for us. So that's a pretty great spot to be in. And so I expect that we'll be doing more of those in 2024 for sure.
Like I'm going to give a plug to my sister channel, Splatter Talk. Like I was at Monster Mania in Hunt Valley at the beginning of the year. And it was my first con video to put on my YouTube channel. And this guy was walking behind me, and he completely photobombed and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you recording?" And he had a YouTube channel. I had a YouTube channel, horror YouTube channel, and we just connected, and we kind of bounced off each other with ideas. And it's an amazing, networking connection we built.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I find that, I work with Chelsea on the podcast, and it's great having a person to bounce ideas off of, because, I have a tendency, and I think anybody that's writing or making anything really has a tendency to fall into the comfortable patterns of what they've done before. And sometimes somebody will have an idea that you just never could have gotten to on your own. And so just any sort of collaboration, like we're even talking about different ways that you promote yourself or promote your brand. Like I try to be a sponge to all of that, because it's you can probably learn something from everybody that does this kind of thing. There's at least two. So
because I've been asked before, when some people say, "Well, I can't believe that you bring other podcasters or YouTubers onto your channel," and I'm like, why fucking would I? Because now their fans are now hopefully coming over to me. Like, why would I not? Especially if they got a bigger fan base than I do. Why would, or even they're smaller? Who cares? If they have 5 subscribers or 5, that's 5 subscribers that I can get,
Yeah.
Why not collaborate?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's a sort of that false scarcity that some people feel like there's only enough attention for, like, your movie or your show, or but there's a reason that they put a McDonald's and a Burger King in the same place, right? They both. I think you never know when you're going to bump into somebody again, or somebody's going to get huge, or you'll meet a friend out of it. I mean, there's, and part of it for me too, admittedly, is just like I like being a part of the horror community. I like to see people get opportunities, and I like to, network with people and help people. And So I think there's a sort of community aspect to it. And I think not uniquely with horror, but very much with horror, there's always that. I think that there are people are in it for the love of the game and not because it's the most lucrative or the best option, a show or podcast, but because it's something that's personally important to them. So, I think that like networking with and having people on your show or plugging other people's stuff is never a bad thing.
It's not. I mean, that's networking is the key to success. It really is. Networking is the key to success. So do you ever see yourself getting back into the filmmaking business?
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely. I think that's something that is probably not in the too distant future for us. I think we want to get a couple of podcast seasons under us. One thing that we've thought about is potentially adapting one of the stories at some point.
I was about to ask that.
Rights to it. One of the things I've also been thinking about, especially from watching a lot of the interviews that you've done with some of the directors who've done movies and released them on Tubi, is thinking about that as a potential like release strategy as well. If we can make something on a budget that's small enough that it wouldn't have to do gangbusters in order to pay for itself, that's something that would be fun as well. I think the podcast right now is like, we're really eager to see how it could evolve into different forms of media, potentially doing some sort of Kickstarter for a film at some point, or adapting one of our stories, or doing a YouTube channel as in addition to our podcast with sort of animated or graphics behind the audio. But I would say that probably sometime mid 2024, we'll definitely be doing, at least in the early stages of doing something else in film. And we've, dipped our toes in it, doing a lot of content for our Instagram accounts, creating reels, having a little fun with just real micro short horror films. And so I would love to get back to it. I think it's a matter of getting far enough into the podcast where I feel like I can devote some more mind share to something new. So I think maybe another 6-8 months, I might be in the mood for that.
Awesome. Check out the guys at Scareplex too.
What is it?
I said, check out the guys at Scareplex. I interviewed them like a month ago. Check out them. They do podcasts, horror podcasts. Check them out.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's good. So, all right. So this is the fun part of the interview. I'm going to ask you 3 random horror questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What horror director do you think is, people who say it is, okay, what horror director do you think is overrated?
Overrated. I feel like I'm always going to end up shooting myself in the I wouldn't say that I think Ty West is overrated, for the record. I love a lot of his films. I haven't seen Pearl yet, and I will give that a chance. Mm-hmm. That was a film that I felt in recent years was a bit overrated, but that also could just be personal taste. As far as any directors that I flat out think are overrated, I wouldn't say so. There's none that come to mind immediately. I would say it'd be easier for me to name movies that I thought were overrated than individual directors.
Okay, all right, let's flip script. What is the number one horror movie that you think is overrated?
Of all time or recent?
Of all time.
Of all time, I would say, I don't want to say that it's necessarily the most overrated of all time, but I would say like I tend to have the maybe unpopular opinion of, not, like I said, not being as into X as all, most of my other horror friends, and also not being into really a couple of the, I'm trying to think of some of the other horror films last year that I was a little bit let down by.
Barbarian? Did you like that?
So I liked Barbarian. It was not what I thought it was going to be, and I think I would have liked that movie better. But I did find the movie I got, I still enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I was not crazy about Infinity Pool, although I really loved his last Brandon Cronenberg's film before that, Possessor. I'm just kind of thinking of stuff that I've watched recently. I think I'm kind of of the tribe of, let people enjoy things. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when I think something, I'm not crazy about it, I'm usually like, I like
Yeah.
a lot of other people hate. So I live and let live in that area.
I tell everybody, like, the original Friday the 13th, I don't see what the big hoopla. I don't think it's a great movie.
I definitely get that, and I think that's a hard franchise to look at looking backwards, because it's the first one. I think would stand out differently if the sequels didn't exist, and you didn't have the all the Jason films to kind of look back on. I think what was interesting about that one at the time is really like from the time Halloween came out to around the time Friday the 13th came out, there were a number of slasher movies, but that was really the next big one that did things that we kind of take for granted now, but looking back, like the arrow through Kevin Bacon's neck was like a ridiculous effect.
Tom Savini doing the practical effects was amazing.
But I will agree, it's the one I watched the absolute least. In part 3 are probably my two favorites.
Yeah.
And part 4 being close behind that. But
because it comes on every Friday the 13th. Like, it's gonna be coming up in what, next week after that?
Yeah.
And every time it comes on, like, skip, like, it's have no interest.
And it's definitely one that, like, I don't know if I've rewatched it in a number of years. So I would kind of that. But I can see how it fits in the slasher film, pantheon as being so high up because of all these effects and whatnot. But
the other one's Jaws. The other one's Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
That's put on the Mount Rushmore of horror movies. It was great, but not as good as people,
I think it's one of those ones too. Like, for me, growing up where Jaws always existed and there was such a part of the zeitgeist, I never really experienced it the way people did in 1975. And I'm curious if that would have been different if if you're able to experience it as, like, you'd never seen a shark attack movie, you weren't inundated with imagery. And but yeah, it's one of my buddy's favorite movies, but I like it. I wouldn't say it's a go-to for me. I did see it here in Austin at they do Jaws in the Water, where you're and you watch it out on an inflatable screen, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that one I like, but it isn't the type of horror I find myself going back to.
Yeah. Now, your opinion, do you think that when it comes to big blockbuster horror movies, do you think they ran out of ideas?
I don't know that I think anybody's run out of ideas. I think what we see happen is every time there's sort of there'll be a fresh idea or a movie that kind of feels new and fresh and exciting, and then there'll be, steadily, maybe still good, but decreasing in quality, kind of copies of that, until we get to the place where, we have just a bunch of sort of regurgitated content coming out. And then the cycle kind of repeats itself. Like, I would say, starting with, like, the first Insidious and Conjuring, we started to kind of move away from the Saw and Eli Roth mid 2000s into more of the jump scare territory and more atmospheric kind of horror.
All that stuff was coming out in that genre. Yeah.
Slowly, like, they were great at first, and there's still some good ones that come out, but it becomes a little predictable and almost like a Mad Libs, where it's like, okay, it's the same movie over and over again, and we just swap these elements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they're out of ideas. I don't think even if we reuse the same ideas, I think we present them in a different way. I don't know if we'll ever run out of them, but I do think we get to places where we sort of paint ourselves into corners, and it takes something kind of radical and different to break us out of that cycle.
I agree, because I was born in the 80s, so the early 80s. So like that was slasher decade. And like you said, Halloween was the first one. Halloween and Psycho, I would say, was the first, and then from there for a whole decade there was nothing but copycats. And then Wes Craven came out with Scream, and Scream was something brand new and fresh. And then boom, we had Urban Legends. I know we did it last summer, and it was like a billion Scream knockoffs that were not on the same level as Scream. And then we went into the found footage, paranormal activity. Then we went into that torture porn. That's the Eli Roth and the Saw. And now we're back at this. We're kind of back at the slasher phase now again. I don't know where we're. Now, I agree, The Conjuring, but I feel like we're back into the slasher phase now when it comes to horror.
It's interesting because I think we also had a little period of time there where there was a lot of hereditary impersonators as well, where some of them were great, but to somewhat varying quality, where you'd have an example that comes to mind that I enjoyed, but I felt like kind of wasn't to the same caliber as some of those other films, is The Lodge, where it's a cool story. It's thematically, it's pretty rich, good characters, but it just feels a little bit like has the bones of something we've seen before. And I feel like that's kind of a cycle that we see in horror all the time, and really just in films in general. When you talk about major studios, when something makes money, they'll juice it until
run it into the ground.
And so, and it's really always, people sometimes talk about like, oh, it was always like, growing up, things were always better, or, no, now it's all sequels and reboots. But when you think about it, if you zoom in on any time in Hollywood, it's like there was like 115 Dracula movies before 19, something like that. I don't know.
A buku of Freddy movies, Chucky, everything. I mean, they just run them into the ground. And that's something I hope Ty West doesn't do with the X series. And that's something that
coming out.
I hope they don't do with the Terrifiers series.
I'm sorry, what was that?
No, I said also I hope that's something they don't do with the Terrifier series. Which unfortunately, I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think they're going to end at 3. I think they're going to run that bad boy into the ground.
Yeah, I think, you're probably right, because unless the third one doesn't make as much money, but I don't see that.
I think it's going to blow out of water. Got a huge budget now. They're going to blow out of water, and from there, we're going to be talking about Terrifier 10.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. But I always, I think back to like the 80s and the series then, and by the late 80s we were in Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Halloween 5, Friday the 13th part, I think all the way up through 8 were in the 80s, and so we've been there before. But I agree. I think like a graceful exit to a series when it's on a high note would always be preferable. But
the money. It's the money.
As long as it can still make money, it's going to make money.
Yep. Because I mean, even like the John Wick, this is not horror, but like they should end John Wick where it's at, and they're talking about bringing it back, and I'm like, come on now, let's not.
I haven't watched it yet, but I saw that there's a spinoff on Hulu, or not on Hulu. Oh.
Yeah.
And so it's like that whole like shared universe, like Marvel universe, DC universe, the Universal universe, can we, Star Wars obviously, and Disney, like
And The Walking Dead actually did it too. Like The Walking Dead killed. I mean, it was just so many different Walking Deads, and like you're like, who can keep up with all this shit?
Yeah, it gets oversaturated and it loses something special about what it when you had to wait years for new content or there wasn't any new content. But I always try to go into it with an open mind because there have been some remakes and reboots that I thought were good, and I used to be far more stubborn about watching them, and so I go in with an open mind. But at the same time, if I don't like one of them, I just kind of I'll just write it off. Like
get rid of. And that's like the original. I get so much shit because I say that the reboot Friday the 13th is the best one. People hate when I fucking say that, but
I actually
really think it is.
Between the remakes of the other, major horror franchises, because the the Nightmare on Elm Street one was.
Oh, that was doo-doo. Yeah, it was horrible.
And I mean, some people like the Rob Zombie Halloweens. I like some of Rob Zombie's movies. I wasn't crazy about his Halloweens. I like
that. Like, and I hear people bash those movies. I think Halloween Kills and Ends were worse than.
I actually
Rob Zombies.
Agree with you there. I thought Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends were both very big letdowns, and actually, like, when I went into Halloween Ends, I figured, well, Halloween Kills, for me, I thought the reason it wasn't good was because I think they made a mistake of announcing it was going to be a trilogy after the first movie, because inherently, nothing really is going to happen in the second movie because they need to save all that for the third movie.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of wasn't even really where that one went off the rails, but I was like, okay, well, all the things that didn't like about Kills, I think will probably be different in this movie. And I was right, but not in a way that enjoy it. But which was 2018. I thought that was a lot of fun.
2018 was amazing, and I wish they would just end it right there. Just
same.
Cut it off.
And that's
that was a good ending.
Watch it, from now on. So it does make me a little bit nervous about the Exorcist reboot since they're in charge.
Yes.
But Exorcist is less of a sanctum or sacrosanct property for me. I like the movie, but I'm less protective of it than I am Halloween. So if they do something wild with it, then
I think he's going to screw it up.
I mean, I think that is also a trilogy, so I would see that one will be good. And
we're gonna get one good one. We're gonna get one good one. We're gonna get one good one, and then the last two are gonna be stinkers. That seems to be his way of doing it. All right, so Kevin, how can everyone find you, my friend?
Yeah, so the best place would be at Dungeon of Delirium on Instagram. So that's where you can keep up with the podcast. We do post some of the stuff from our other shop as well there. And we'll be announcing any in-person events that we have. And, it's a great place just to connect with us and find out what we've got going on. Because we always have a bunch of different weird projects in our workshop here. So,
are you on the East Coast or West Coast?
We're actually in Austin, Texas. I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Maine, but I've been down here since 2012. Okay. So we're in the middle.
Okay. I didn't know if I was going to run into you on one of the conventions on the East Coast circuit or not. So
at some point, we were definitely we're going to be in Colorado for one. So we're not opposed to traveling around, and so we'll probably do some stuff on the East Coast, especially where I grew up in New England. I lived in Boston for a while, so I know people in those areas I can stay with and whatnot.
Sweet.
We'll definitely keep in touch if we're going to be in the same place. We'd love to catch up in person.
Most definitely. I love Austin, Texas. I was in Austin, Texas 7 years ago, and I was there for a convention. It was the Austin Comic Con, and I met Bruce Campbell and Danny Trejo there. So I love Austin.
I used to work right by that convention center. Just about 5-6 blocks away from there. So I would walk down whenever they'd have, because that's a lot of South by Southwest stuff happens there. And I didn't meet Bruce Campbell, but I've seen him in Austin during South by Southwest from across the street before. And we have the Alamo here, so we sometimes get sort of random celebrity pop-ins. I ran into Elijah Wood on my birthday about
nice.
Because he lives here part of the year and goes to the Draft House a lot. So
I love Austin, Texas. I say all the time, like the three places. So I live in Baltimore. So if the three places that I would relocate to is San Diego, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, and Austin, Texas. I love Austin, Texas. Love it.
Fun. I kind of moved here blind because I had some friends move down here, and they moved here in 2011. And I just was like, well, I want to move somewhere out of Boston. I'm kind of getting tired of the cold winters and here, and I stuck around since. And there's a cool community for all the stuff that I'm into. A lot of fun too.
You're close to Dallas, and you're not that far from Houston too. So it was
only about an hour and a half away. And there's a stuff down there. That was actually the first event we did was down in San Antonio.
Nice. By the way, the very first Buc-ee's I've ever been to was in Austin, Texas. That was the first Buc-ee's. I've been to several since.
Yeah.
The first Buc-ee's I've ever been to was Austin, Texas. And I was just in awe. I was like, oh, what is this place?
It's also the cleanest bathrooms if you're driving. Good snacks. Yeah.
Yes. Buc-ee's is amazing. There's Buc-ee's are all over the place now, but the first one I went to 7 years ago was in Austin, Texas.
Awesome.
Well, listen, everyone, please check out. Listen, we went all over the place when I'm talking about Buc-ee's now. Check out Kevin. His show, October 6th, we're going to be releasing on his podcast, The Dungeon of Delirium. Kevin, I would love to have you back on anytime, man. Anytime.
Awesome. Yeah.
You're more than welcome.
Awesome. And we will be doing some Patreon episodes where we're going to be just sort of talking with other horror people in the horror community and whatnot. And so
more than welcome, man. More than welcome to come on. I mean, I'll come on. Yeah, 100%.
Be great.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.